we connected to NORAD now? Okay, with that, I'd like to call this regular session of the Manitou Springs City Council to order for February 15th, 2022. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And now we will begin with the regular session. If we could start with a call to with a roll call, please.
Yes. City Council members Judith Chandler. Present. Julie Wolf. Here. Natalie Johnson. Here. Nancy Fortune. Present. Michelle Weatherholt. Present. Mayor Pro Tem John Shada. Here. And Mayor John Graham.
Present. Thank you. Okay. Council, I believe you've all had a chance to look at the agenda. I would request a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Great. Okay. And we've got all 7 people here and voting tonight. It's nice to have everybody healthy and in person. Great. Motion passes. Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. So if we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak to a non-agenda item, or Judy, have we had any interest?
No, Mayor.
Okay, I guess not. Okay, we'll move on then. Next item is the consent calendar. We have 2 items tonight. First is approval of the February 1st, 2022 regular meeting minutes. Second is approval of the February 8th, 2022 special meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to accept and approve?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Okay, motion by Councilor Chandler and seconded by Councilor Wolf. All in favor say aye. Aye. Again, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, our first piece of business, first reading of ordinance number 0422, an ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Title II of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code regarding updating Chapter 2.24, Transportation and Parking Advisory Board, and adding the Manitou Arts, Culture, and Heritage Advisory Board under boards and commissions. And with that, we have presentations by Becca Davis and Kevin Stevenson. Becca, thank you.
Good evening. This is basically a housekeeping task. The Manitou Arts, Cultures, and Heritage Advisory Board was created in mid-2020. The board is required to be added by ordinance to the Boards and Commissions section of the Municipal Code. At the same time, the Transportation and Parking Advisory Board wishes to change its name to Mobility and Parking Advisory Board and update their powers and duties. This ordinance accomplishes both tasks. Kevin and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, and Kevin, did you have any remarks you wanted to make as we open up?
I would just like to introduce myself. Wish a good evening to council, Mr. Mayor, Kevin Stevenson, Mobility Parking Manager.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, with that, council, do we have questions or comments? Councilor Fortune?
Yeah, I have one question on the Mobility and Parking Board change. And that is, and I did not, unfortunately, there was not a redlined version in the packet, and I failed to go back and check this. But on paragraph I, board members may request future agenda items related to their concerns about mobility, transportation, and parking issues. That seemed like a SOP issue rather than an ordinance issue, and I was just wondering why that was, why the board thought that that was needed in the ordinance.
I guess that would be to make sure that these items are allowed to be added by board members. The entire powers and duties, the rewrite of the ordinance was the board's own words. And we agreed as staff to bring this and present to City Council.
Okay.
Oh, can I ask a follow-up on Nancy's question?
Okay, just a second here. Did you have a follow-on? Yes, okay. All right, Councilor Wolf, please.
So does that mean that as opposed to, the chair of the board having sole authority over agenda items, that the entire board members can request an item without it necessarily being a majority a vote or anything. They can just request it and they'll get what they want. Is that what I means?
I believe the intent behind that is for any board to request the chair to consider the item for the next agenda.
Oh, so it's really, the agenda is controlled solely by the chair?
Yes.
You might want to clarify that on I, but okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have other questions or comments from council? From staff? Denise?
Yeah, I just want to say, if you guys want to clarify that and reword that one, you can definitely do that, because you're the one that's approving this. So if you want to say, you know, the board chair sets the agenda and then manage it like it is here, but that's your call.
And that's why I wish I'd gone back to because it might be in the general section, actually, that is already listed as a requirement.
Or the requirement might even be like on council, where if the majority moves and votes to have an agenda item, that over the objection of the chair, they can still do it. But that's not at all clear with I. But is there, Nancy just referred to, is that somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at, so just, sorry to interrupt, that your municipal code has a general section dealing with boards and commissions and how they operate. And I was just trying to find it while you were talking. That's why I didn't chime in quicker. But basically, there's a 2.09.080 of the municipal code, which is basically boards and commissions generally. It provides that the chair will have final authority to establish the agenda, but will collaborate with other members and staff in its development. And so that applies to all boards and commissions. So I guess, you know, my suggestion, you know, now that you've raised this issue, you probably don't want to have that I in there. It just adds to confusion, because the process is that any board member and any board can ask for something to be added, and it's a decision for the board to discuss, and the chairperson can make the final choice. So I think it'd probably be better not to have it different for this board than for other boards. That'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, Councilor Fortune?
I would make a motion unless people have more discussion.
Do we have additional discussion?
So I'll move to approve ordinance number 0422, an ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Title II of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code regarding updating Chapter 2.24, Transportation and Parking Advisory Board, and adding the Manitou Arts, Culture, Heritage Advisory Board under Boards and Commissions on first reading, and with the exception of removing paragraph I under the Mobility and Parking Board section, and set a public hearing for March 1st at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, and set a public hearing at second reading.
We have a motion, seconded by Councilor Wolf. Any further discussion? If not, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That was simple.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we are at that point, receive or act on council correspondence. So I guess I'd like to start off, and I kind of need to get everybody's opinion here on when we could get together and do our retreat, our council retreat. And I know we're all busy and we've had different kind of conflicts. I believe Natalie has a board retreat for the match this Saturday, the 19th. Denise is out of town over the weekend. Michelle can't make it the first weekend in March. I had entertained the idea of maybe doing it next Tuesday instead of having a work session, our typical kind of work session. Maybe we get started at 4 o'clock. I think I had several of you, at least several have responded and said you could do it. It's probably not people's first choice, but it is a date that seems to work. So if we could open up that discussion a little bit.
Question?
Yes.
You mentioned the March 5th being not a date we could do, but is March 12th pushing it out too far?
I'll be out of town that weekend.
Okay.
I'll be on the first 2 weekends in March.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, would doing it next Tuesday be a hardship if we were like to start at 4 o'clock, work for a couple hours, have dinner, work a while longer? And I guess, John, I'd kind of like to hear you chime in, because you and I talked about this a lot, and I've talked about it with every council member, but you and I especially spend a lot of time. So what are your thoughts?
I'm cool to it in terms of, John knows my discussion with him was that I was hoping that we would spend some time together, maybe not a long day. So actually, if people feel like 4 o'clock, that you're fresh enough to kind of go for an hour or something and then get your batteries charged up for dinner and then maybe have an hour or so after. I wouldn't want it to go any later than almost like 8 o'clock or 7:30 or 8 o'clock, if we did it that way.
Okay, and that was something we talked about doing on a Saturday. We talked about actually, meeting for breakfast at 8:30, getting started at 9, and then pushing on to maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's kind of seeing where people were. We could potentially, under that format, go to 4 o'clock, but again, I think John and I both felt that if we'd had enough by 1:30, 2 o'clock, we could call it a day and feel like it was a good day spent. I guess the other, bear with me here, I was just going to check calendar dates.
Is the 19th of March an option?
Because if we're only going to talk for 2 hours, an hour before dinner and an hour after dinner, we're going to need a heck of a lot more time than 2 hours.
We probably, but I guess I would expect if we did it next week, that maybe have a couple hours before dinner and then 2 or 3 hours afterwards. So I would see us carrying on till about maybe 9.
So we would leave at 9, not at 7:30.
Yeah, so I guess that's where John and I are different on that, but
No, I agree.
I mean, it's really, if we're, this could go a couple of ways, and if we're energized, 9 o'clock, we might be like 20-year-olds again.
Depending on what you give us for dinner.
Well, that's possibly.
Lots of sugar.
So I think it's, this is kind of a hard call because I think we all respond a little differently in the evening. So, I mean, certainly I wanted to get council's sense of things.
So maybe we ought to just get a sense. How do people feel about, let's say, 4 o'clock, a dinner time, and then an hour and a half or 2 afterwards? Is that, people
That would be
feel like?
okay if we can also have other meetings, like if we're going to schedule 3 different Tuesday work sessions, or if we're going to add a Saturday, half day to it, or, because just one evening with, I don't know, you were thinking we just do it once and that's it?
No,
Because I would like to see because if we could maybe at least reserve 2 or 3 different possible dates, and then if it turns out that we're so amazingly productive that we can cancel the 3rd meeting, that's fine, but maybe we could go ahead and see if we can get some more dates on the calendar besides the 22nd so that we have the placeholder.
okay. Well, I guess one of the things is if we do this on the 22nd, next week, we could at least get started and see how we like the format. And I think as I spoke to each of you, my sense is that this is mostly an opportunity for us all to talk about our goals. We don't need to come away with a plan. We need to be able to start talking, and I think John and I both envisioned that this would be a process that we might invoke at different times throughout the year. We can continue, and that's at council's pleasure. I know Councilors Chandler and Michelle had comments too, so Judith?
Well, I certainly, to me, it's a Plan B. I don't feel like we are at our freshest in the afternoon and evening after our daytime commitments. I also feel that when we have an opportunity to be together on a Saturday, the culture and the environment is just different. And I feel like, especially with Michelle coming on board, I just feel like we're more fresh, and it's a more relaxed environment. So those would be my reasons for not wanting to get together on the 22nd and to move it out to the first Saturday that we're all available. Also, my question is how urgent is this that that if it's really urgent and our city administrator wants to, have some idea of what's on our minds, I certainly understand that. But if it's not that urgent, I would just advocate that we come together well-rested and at a time when we can share together. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
My comments are, if we did meet at 4 o'clock on the 22nd and then we have follow-up on the 22nd, are we still going to do, when we met with you individually, our little 7-minute presentation type
Yeah,
for our goals?
that would be the expectation.
Would we be using the
Certainly.
same format?
Well, yeah, everybody have a chance to get up and talk about what they think is important. And the idea that 7 minutes was to try and get it done in about an hour. That was the
Okay.
thought. So I
Okay.
think we'd still stick to that same.
And then I like Julie's, if we did the 22nd, to have follow-ups. But then I also like Judith's, finding a Saturday.
Right, okay. Well, because I was just looking at the calendar, February, we've got the 26th is a Saturday, 27th is a Sunday. I guess Sunday's available for consideration. With the 26th,
Isn't the 26th the Carnival Parade?
Yes.
Oh, I'm not available
Okay.
that day.
okay.
And I'll be in Chicago for my grandma's birthday.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. Yes, I'm sorry. Natalie had mentioned that, so yeah. Okay. This, sorry, such a simple task. Well, there's March 19th. Wait, excuse me, I'm sorry. I will be back on March 19th, but it'll be late that day. My apologies. 20th would work? Yeah, I think, or the 26th. The 20th, is there a problem with the 20th? I think I get back late the 19th, but I think I can make the 20th. It's a Sunday, yeah. Okay, you want to shoot for May 20th, or put it to March 20th? Any objection? So, okay, let's plan on, well, Denise, there's no, okay. So Sunday, March the 20th. That's what we'll shoot for. Okay, well, that was my question. So our item for council correspondence. Anybody else have anything? If not, let's go to the city administrator's report.
Good evening. I have a couple of things. Just some dates that I want to mention. City Hall redesign for the Zoom meeting is February 17th. The library in-person meeting is February 23rd here in City Hall. The library Zoom meeting is February 24th. The library kiosk was installed, so if you have a chance, go over there and look. And Linda Moreland and her husband made it. It's amazing, so go look at that. The vaccination clinic is this Friday from 12 to 6, so encourage people to come and get vaccinated. The grocery distribution today, there were 50 people who came and were able to get groceries, so that was great. Monday is President's Day and City Hall is closed, so I want to remind everybody of that. We have 40 kids signed up for soccer for here in our community, so 40 Manitou kids have signed up for our soccer program, which is our very first time, and that's pretty exciting, so that's a great thing. Remind everybody the peak alert to sign up for that, and it's on the website. Also, I wanted to let you know we have completed the evidence audit again. I haven't received it, but whenever I receive it, I'll make sure you guys get the analysis of that, so as soon as I get it. And Julie, you mentioned about, or Councilor Wolf, you mentioned about SOP for returning phone calls and emails. We do have a citywide SOP, and we expect everybody to have emails and phone calls returned within 24 hours if they're at work, right? So police may work for 3 days and then off, but that is our expectation, and we're really, I know we've improved on that tremendously, But if you ever have somebody that's not getting a response, let me know and we'll manage accordingly. So that's what I had for the update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And actually, there was one other topic that I forgot to mention. That has to do with the work session for Cheyenne Village. It's scheduled to be Cheyenne Village, the Historic Preservation Commission's position on that is scheduled for a work session on the 8th, and then to be addressed in regular session on March the 15th, the following week. And this is kind of an odd situation. I'm going to ask for a little bit of an explanation from Mr. Parker. But in our city code, there is a requirement that as we go through this process, we discuss it at a work session, where it says to have it on the agenda at a work session, and then to follow that up with a regular meeting. And this is kind of an odd thing because it doesn't necessarily take into consideration the quasi-judicial nature of the matter. So I'm thinking maybe that our code needs to be revisited and cleaned up. Mr. Parker, I'll look to you for some guidance.
Yeah, it would probably be worth a look to see how that works. I think the general concept was for changing the historic district boundaries would be sort of a legislative type decision involving large areas of property when you're setting boundaries for the district. But there are situations in which it would be a specific application from a specific piece of property to change the boundary for that piece of property. And there are criteria, there's a public hearing. So the concept of a work session is definitely not consistent with the quasi-judicial concept of all information should be provided for such a decision at a public hearing. So I think my suggestion was, well, I don't like skipping steps that are in your code, but I don't like jeopardizing the quasi-judicial nature of a proceeding. So I guess my suggestion would be that you still hold the work session so you comply with your code, but really it'd only be an opportunity for city council members to inform staff of the questions that they may be bringing at the public hearing and information they may want to see or receive at the public hearing. So they really aren't getting, it really isn't the receipt of information for city council to make a decision on. It's more providing staff and the applicant notice of what they're going to be considering, what they might want to see at the public hearing, something like that. So it's kind of trying to thread the needle there a little bit.
Thank you. And Julie, you'd had questions about that.
Well, yeah,
Please.
That's helpful. So in other words, are you saying there will not be a presentation by the applicant or staff or anybody, right? We're just there to say, we'd like to know your middle name because all we see is an initial, or we want to make sure you give us blah, blah, blah during the hearing. That's part of the evidence we'd really like to see. And then thank you, goodbye, and then that's it.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion because I think that the work session was more designed for a non-single applicant type consideration. So like I said, I would normally say don't even have a work session, but it's in your code. So I don't like to skip steps in the code.
Well, and this is so annoying. Yeah. My follow-up is, so we can just go in and change the code and say, P.S., this doesn't apply to quasi-judicial proceedings going forward in the future. Wouldn't that be kind of a simple
Yeah, but it's not a bad idea.
change?
Yeah, I'd want to read it and make a few tweaks, but I think that would be a better approach. I think, like I said, it does make sense to have a work session when you're considering what the boundary should be in general, that kind of thing. But when you're dealing with a specific application, it shouldn't be.
It should be exempt, yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Would it be council's sentiment that we asked Mr. Parker to propose an improvement over our code the way it is now so we don't get into this mess again? I see heads nodding, Mr. Parker. If you
Got
could-
direction.
Great, if you take that upon yourselves. Oh, and I guess something I didn't think of either is we really don't have anything else on the agenda for the anticipated work session next week. We're kind of holding that open for, our retreat as an option. But since we don't have the retreat, then I guess we're off next Tuesday. If there's no objections, we will not meet next Tuesday. Okay, great. So that's, I see tears all
I
around the room.
miss you already.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I have a question for Denise.
Just a second, Counselor Fortune and then Julie. Counselor Fortune?
Yeah, I just wanted to back up to the previous issue on the quasi-judicial and the work session. And I think I understand why we shouldn't do it in a work session. However, I think sometimes if I want my cake and eat it too, the experience with the trading post, I think much of the community was in something of a echo chamber, and they only heard one viewpoint on the trading post. And the night that we discussed it, they heard multiple viewpoints. So that's why I was looking forward actually to it being at the work session, because it might have been a more broad, balanced approach to it, even though the vote was pretty clear. But I know that some people kind of regretted their position that they had taken in the community on it. So I'm betwixt and between on it.
Right, no, that's a good point, and it's just, there's always this sort of tension between the due process rights of an individual applicant to basically have decisions made based upon a public hearing with some more formalities versus the ability to just kind of get more broad-ranging concepts, community input at a work session, and sort of a little more freewheeling. And, it's always a problem, it's always a tension, and I generally err on the side of due process under the Constitution, just because, there's more liability involved there. And I think that the more freewheeling work sessions are better fitted for sort of legislative type decisions and bigger, broader matters. Interestingly, with the Historic Preservation District, there is an argument that is legislative in nature when you're changing the boundaries of an historic preservation district, because it's not, it's sort of it's like a broad zoning type situation, which can be legislative in nature. But rezoning can also be quasi-judicial, so it's got kind of the dual element to it. And so I think that, with the work session for changing the historic preservation district boundaries, there's an argument to be made that, well, it is still legislative, but when you have an individual property owner coming in with an application and there's criteria in your code, I get a lot more nervous. So I just think that it's better to err on the side of making sure you don't violate due process and then reserve work sessions for bigger, broader issues. But I do understand your concern there. Hopefully, the public ultimately recognizes that the real information is getting presented during the public hearing, and it's an opportunity to hear and participate versus just, hearsay on the street. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Julie?
Jeff, can you address, is it proper or improper for council members before the quasi-judicial hearing occurs, should we, be sure just in our own conscience, should we avoid listening to any of the commission meetings that address the same thing, and then the commission meetings result in a recommendation to us, and we don't necessarily get handed at the quasi-judicial hearing, we don't get a transcript of the commission meeting, we get we get some little staff report or something. Can you address that with respect to HPC and the Planning Commission?
Yeah. So, we had, several years ago, we had a conversation about how do we get maybe a more, a more pleasing receipt of lower commission's recommendations than just from a staff report. But ultimately, right now, that's the way the city does it. And so the answer is you should be really reserving your consideration to matters that are presented during the actual public hearing, which is the staff report, comments from this public, et cetera, and not going outside and gathering your own information, which would be like, if you watch the HPC hearing or the PC hearing or whatever's involved, you didn't, you did, you watched half of it, you didn't watch all of it, then you're not really getting a consistent, the evidence being reviewed is inconsistent. So I recommend against doing that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. All right, well, our next, okay, Julie, what is it?
A question following up on Denise's report. With respect to the upcoming library meetings, if I recall correctly, the last time the library design was discussed, we were told that we were going to be getting a new design to look at that we'd be able to talk about at that meeting. I think it had to do with the door being moved or something. The front door, or I forget what it was that HPC recommended, and I don't know if we ever saw that. Did we get the redesign on that?
No, you've not received that, and I would have to go back and look and see exactly what that said. I don't recall that, Julie, so I'm going to have to go back and read the minutes and see what that entails.
Okay, yeah, maybe I'm confused, but I thought we were going to get a slight redo, but thank you for looking into that before the meeting, please, because I think the public should see it, and I think it should be posted on the city's website before that first meeting comes up. Thanks so much.
Okay. All right, then. Our next item of business, 3 items actually, we have executive sessions. I'll read all 3 of them, and then I'll ask for a motion to go into executive session. The first, an executive session to hold a conference with the city attorney for legal advice pursuant to Section 5.1C of the Manitou Springs City Municipal Charter concerning the role of city council in personnel matters. The second item, an executive session to discuss personnel matters regarding an applicant for employment pursuant to Section 5.1A of the Manitou Springs City Charter. This executive session is to consider police chief applicants. And the third item, an executive session for the purchase or sale of property for a public purpose pursuant to Section 5.1B of the Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning the potential acquisition of property for mobility and parking. Do we have a motion? We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Do we need a few minutes to change over here? Okay, thank you. Do you want to, Judy, would a 5-minute break be sufficient? 5 minutes? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.